Hello, and welcome again to another episode of This Song Sucks, podcast where three musician pals get together and talk about the songs that we hate. I am Josh Kavanaugh, and I'm joined today, as always, by Hayden. I just moved into a basement, but at least it's not my parents' Crawford. How's it going, Hayden?
Ladies and gentlemen!
Welcome, buddy. And again, we are joined today by illustrious guest hosts, Blaine, I don't smoke dope with Satan since he left me at the mall, Duncan. How you doing, Blaine?
Oh, I'm great. Got an energy drink to wash down my amphetamines, and I'm ready to... We're back to Cosmic Stardust because it really seemed to fit the motif of the day.
Cosmic Stardust and the hot dog flavored water?
You get where I'm going.
Yeah, Blaine, why don't you go ahead if our listeners haven't figured out what song are we going to be doing today?
We're doing the 1999 classic Limp Bizkit song, Nookie. It feels weird to say it with seriousness.
Is this the one about the chainsaw?
You'd have to expand on that for me, I think.
It'll skin your ass raw.
Blaine is not quite as versed in the lyrics, I think, of the overall catalog of Limp Bizkit that you might be, Hayden.
Yeah. What does that say about me as a person?
Nothing good, probably.
Nothing ever does.
Let's jump right into it with a little bio and timeline on the band and, of course, the lead singer, frontman Fred Durst. So a lot of what I found was sourced from, apparently there was actually a biography called Limp Bizkit by a fellow named Colin Devonish, and it was published in 2000. So this is, probably being written right around the time of their sort of takeoff with the song Nookie and the album that it came from. So going right into it, Fred Durst was born in Jacksonville, Florida in 1970.
Shocking development. You mean they're from Florida?
Yeah.
Fred Durst is more Florida than a Panama City Walmart.
That's pretty bad. He actually apparently moved to North Carolina at a very early age. I think maybe his parents got divorced. I couldn't find it exactly. But this is another interesting fact, is that he joined the Navy after high school and left after 2 years, then moved back to Jacksonville where he worked as a landscaper, I think for his dad, and also part-time as a tattoo artist. Could you imagine getting a tattoo from a guy like that?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, I wonder what his bedside manner would be while he's giving somebody a tattoo.
Just getting some titties on your forearm.
Yeah, he'd be the guy to go to for that, for sure. But from an early age, Durst took an interest in breakdancing, hip-hop, punk rock, and heavy metal. So when he moved back to Jacksonville, apparently he started developing an idea for a band that would combine all of these elements from rock and hip-hop. And he, I guess, sang in a couple of early bands, but one of them he was playing with the bassist Sam Rivers, they would leave that band and form Limp Bizkit together. And then Rivers suggested that his cousin, who is the drummer John Otto, also joined the band. And at the time, Otto was studying jazz drumming at the Douglas Anderson School of Arts, which is a magnet high school in Jacksonville that specializes in performing arts. And at the same time, guitarist Wes Borland, I think, was there, and that's how they found him. I couldn't find it specifically if that's what they said, but assuming they had that high school connection. I couldn't find the exact timeline of this, but even with the most generous estimate, Durst is in his early to mid-20s playing in bands with high school students.
That is not surprising.
Yeah, it really kind of fits into the character.
He definitely has vibes of one of those guys that is always hanging out with people way too young around him.
Yeah.
Oh, that comes up.
Does it?
Oh, you got some of that for us later, Blaine?
Well, I think we all know about his song about Britney Spears, who's 12 years younger than him.
Ooh, yeah, well...
What song?
Oh, I'll try to check my notes if I've got the actual...
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter, but he had a thing for her or even stalked her. I can't remember the exact...
I remember something about this.
Our listeners are going to be angry at me because they will remember.
Well, we'll put a pin in it for now, and if you got some downtime while we're recording, Blaine, you can pop it up. But so they've got this core group now of Durst, Rivers, Otto, and Borland. So this is sort of the tidbit I found on the origination of the Limp Bizkit name. And Durst said that he chose the name specifically because he wanted to repel listeners. Quote, "The name is there to turn people's heads away. A lot of people pick up the disc and go, Limp Bizkit. Oh, they must suck."
Interesting take on it.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a different time of music when you can like name a band something you want to turn someone's head and still expect to sell records.
Yeah, it was a different time 20-something years ago, 25, 26 years ago. But other names that were considered include Gimp Disco, Split Dick Slit, Bitch Piglet,
Whoa now.
and Blood Fart.
That first one wasn't so bad. What was it, Disco?
Gimp Disco, yeah.
That's good.
Blood fart.
Blood Fart, yeah.
That, not so good.
Oh, Fred.
So early on, the band developed a following in the underground, quote, music scene in Jacksonville. They played at a local punk club called the Milk Bar.
The Milk Bar?
The Milk Bar.
Boy, this goes back, doesn't
This
it?
goes back to our Kenny Chesney discussion. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's where he went after the fight with his wife.
Get some heavy cream.
So anyway, the owner, Danny Wimmer, is quoted as saying that Limp Bizkit had the biggest draw for a local band. They went from playing for about 10 people to 800 within months. Fred was always marketing the band, and then this is the best part. He would go to record stores and get people involved. He was in touch with high schools, was the term he used.
Oh, man. I hate this.
Yeah, it's pretty gross.
I just Urban Dictionary Limp Bizkit, and I wish I hadn't.
Oh, well, we'll let our listeners do that on their own rather than having
I'm not
discuss
reading
it
that out
on
loud.
air. So, but during this early time, Durst really hustled. He would pretend to be the band's manager and try to attract the attention of local record labels' A&R reps, but apparently had no success with this tactic. I mean, I would imagine you're an A&R guy at a record label and you see a guy come up that looks like Fred Durst and he says, "I'm the band's manager." You'd have to be wondering what the fuck the rest of the actual band is like.
Well, I mean, if you're in Jacksonville, what the fuck do they expect? A guy like Fred Durst to walk up. Speaking of Jacksonville, I want to talk really briefly about just the Jacksonville music scene that they came out of.
Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, I just want to say that Jacksonville, I was just reading about Jacksonville and looking at it on the map, and it kind of, like the location that it is in Florida kind of gives me the impression that it's like the city behind Florida's ear that never gets washed, you know? that's a spot you can't quite reach.
The Grundle.
But they have like a pretty rich Southern rock history as far as bands that were formed or from there.
Okay.
Obviously, everybody knows Skinner's from Jacksonville. The Allman Brothers actually formed in Daytona Beach, like 50 miles from there, and used that as a city hub before moving, to Georgia. 38 Special is from Jacksonville.
Ooh, Caught Up in You.
Is Molly Hatchet with the Gomer Pyle voice. Like when I was a kid, I thought Gomer Pyle sang that song.
I'm flirting with
Man flirting. Hey, Andy. My dad had to be like, "No, that's not Gomer Pyle, son."
That's a great story.
But so like after the classic rock wave kind of died out, then you have the real underbelly starts to come out with Limp Bizkit. Yellow Card is also from there. You hear the band Cold, Blaine? I didn't know that Cold was from there.
No.
You don't remember their smash album 13 Ways to Bleed on Stage?
Did they really have a hit song or a song I would know?
Yeah, they had like a couple minor like alt metal hits that sucked ass.
So I remember, Hayden, that when we went on a school trip to New Orleans in 9th grade,
Oh God.
we went to the Tower Record store there, and you bought that record, and on the bus on the way home, you were listening to it. And after listening to like 3 songs, you said, "This song sucks ass," or "This album sucks ass," and you threw the disc out of the window on the interstate.
Yes.
Sounds like I did the right thing.
Yeah.
Also, maybe the most offensive member of this lineup is the Tedeschi Trucks Band is fucking from there. Man, that maybe the only thing worse than Eric Clapton in my book is that
Yeah,
band.
if I want to go to sleep real fast, I'll put them on.
Yeah, that is some white bullshit.
I mean, a lot of people like them, but it's just, there's really nothing I've heard from them that makes me want to continue listening.
Yeah, I was gonna dig a little deeper on Jacksonville than I thought. Why? So that's all I got.
Yeah. Well, so at the time in Jacksonville, this is actually how the break occurs. This is early days for Korn, and they played there quite a bit apparently.
Shocker.
And I'm assuming I couldn't find the exact details, but I'm assuming that Durst was either hanging out or maybe they were on the set that night as an opener or something. But their break came when Durst was able to convince the bassist for Korn to listen to their demo tape. Apparently, Durst invited the band out for beers after one of the performances and offered to tattoo them.
As one does.
Yeah, apparently the bassist was not impressed with the tattoo, but he was impressed with the band's demo tape. So,
And one you're stuck with for life.
yes.
Have you ever seen Fielding? He's got no shortage of tattoos. I don't think you'll notice.
Well, I would have to imagine that Durst one's probably been covered up by now.
I would encourage you both to look up a picture of Fieldy if you've never done it before.
We'll do that. We'll save that for later. But Korn added Limp Bizkit to 2 of their tours.
Oh, the Family Values, huh?
This was like, I think.
Or is that this is probably before that?
This is like 95 or 96.
Oh, okay, yes, before that. I think Family Values is 98.
Well, it's really before Korn really blew up, but they were obviously bigger than Limp Bizkit, and they had national tours going on. So Limp Bizkit kind of tagged onto that, and that gave them the exposure they needed to attract the record label attention. That's how they got their first record deal. But here's just a quote I found. So apparently, while touring with Korn in '97, they received the following review from the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. Quote, "The one attention-grabbing moment of Limp Bizkit's rap thrash show is when the lead singer expressed a desire for gay men to be stomped."
Oh, good.
That seems really chill.
Yes, I mean, again, on brand. And in that vein, another quote this is from the keyboardist for the band Faith No More, and he had the following recollection when encountering Durst on the tour. Quote, "The guy Fred Durst had a really bad attitude. He was kind of a jerk. I remembered he called the audience a gay slur. You can fill in the blank. At one show when they booed him." Again, ending the quote, "Not a good scene."
I mean, I knew we were going to get into some of this kind of talk when we're talking about this fucking loser, but man, has there ever been anybody in the history of music that needs their ass kicked more than this guy?
No.
Probably not.
No.
I think you'd be hard pressed.
I mean, I can't think of anybody who needs to shut the fuck up more than he does.
Yeah, that wraps up into some of my assertions.
Yeah, we'll get that. You'll see this thread continue as we go on. Mm-hmm. So, and here, right immediately off the bat, the band released their first album, $3 Bill, y'all, in July '97.
Sick.
And isn't that a gay
Yes.
slur reference? Yeah.
Is it?
Yes, continuing the theme of using intentionally repulsive sounding names and homophobia. Apparently, it's the phrase is.
Geez.
I think we all know that one. I don't need to say it.
No.
And then he wanted to add some Jacksonville flavor by adding y'all at the end of it.
Sweet.
Yeah,
It's kind of like Omaha style, except Jacksonville.
sure. So this album is their cover of George Michael's "Faith" is on this record, and it became a radio hit. Although it didn't chart on the Hot 100. In an interview, guitarist Wes Borland stated that George Michael hated the cover and quote hates us for doing it.
I think the cover kind of slaps, if I'm being honest.
It's not that bad, but I mean I could see why George Michael would not be a fan of it, mostly because it's such a different style, but also because Fred Durst is clearly homophobic.
Yeah.
This album, $3 Bill Y'all, would eventually reach double platinum status. So that's after a while. This is not a huge breakout hit, but they're showing up on MTV with this cover. So in '98, the band got a slot on the Ozfest tour, but apparently they were almost kicked off the tour after 2 days because their fans kept breaking through the barricades.
Another motif we'll find out about.
Yes, we'll get to that shortly here. And so now we're getting to their album Significant Other was released in June of '99. This is the album with Nookie on it. The album sold over 600,000 copies in its first week of release, peaked on number 1 in the Billboard 200, and it stayed on that chart for 103 weeks. So nothing to spit at for sure as far as longevity of its popularity. This, other than Nookie, the singles include Rearrange, In Together Now, which I think has Method Man on it.
It does.
And then of course, Break Stuff.
Shut the fuck up.
Yeah. This album would get 7 times platinum eventually.
7, huh?
Mm-hmm. And it was nominated for Best Rock Album at the 99 Grammys, but of course, the runaway winner that year is Santana's Supernatural.
Oh, we're back to this song again.
Yeah, that's going to keep coming up whenever we talk about 90s music, is just that freaking freight train coming through.
I know we talked about this on a previous episode, but you know what I forgot about that record? Is that Dave Matthews is on the track.
And that's why Santana appeared on his Everyday album with that track.
He's on Everyday?
Mm-hmm. Mother Father is him on it.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, Nookie itself, it peaked at number 80 on the Billboard Hot 100, and it was on the chart for 11 weeks total. It was a number 3 on the alternative chart and number 6 on the main rock chart, so that a little better showing there as expected than the Hot 100. The song itself was nominated for Best Hard Rock Performance at the 99 Grammys, but that lost to Metallica's Whiskey in a Jar.
Oh, that fucking song.
Mm-hmm. So, a month after the second album's release, the band performed in front of 200,000 people at the infamous Woodstock 99.
Yeah, I've got a lot to say about that.
Feel free to interject here, but I'll just give a brief synopsis and some of the stuff that he said afterwards. But the story is that, quote, violent action is what the source I said called it, sprang up during and after the performance, including fans tearing plywood from the walls during the song Break Stuff. Several sexual assaults were reported in the aftermath of the concert.
Yeah.
So afterwards, Durst stated in an interview, I didn't see anybody getting hurt. You don't see that. When you're looking out on a sea of people and the stage is 20 feet in the air and you're performing and you're feeling your music, how do you expect us to see something bad going on? However, during the actual fucking concert, this is what he said to the crowd. People are getting hurt. Don't let anybody get hurt. But I don't think you should mellow out. That's what Alanis Morissette had you motherfuckers do. If someone falls, pick them up. We're already letting the negative energy out. Now we want to let out the positive energy. So, complete horseshit. He saw what was going on to some extent. And did very little, it seems, to discourage that. I mean, Blaine, do you have any other tidbits from this that you want to add?
Sure, quite a bit. I was wondering if we were going to talk about this. Writer Kyle Anderson pinpoints the Limp Bizkit performance in the 99 Woodstock as the moment grunge died. And I thought that was interesting. I love pinpoints in history that can signal things, although, it takes a lot more than just one thing. The organizer of the event, this is pulled from an article by Stephen Hayden on The Ringer. You had a cheerleader in Fred Durst who, if I haven't said enough times, is a complete asshole. Fred Durst was a moron, he said. And but the piece by Hayden from The Ringer really does try to make the argument that Bizkit should not be blamed, at least not wholly. It quotes Jonathan Davis from Korn, by the way. He said, I don't think that riots should have happened, period. Davis said that was some bullshit, but I think Bizkit being blamed for it because they were the heavy band. We were the outlaws at the time. I don't think that was their fucking fault. The piece points out that the real riots, and this is true, obviously, those images of the place burning that are easily recalled at nighttime, that happened the next night during you guys' favorite band, Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yep.
Anyway, I'll pull some more quick quotes because I'm so interested in that performance. This is from the same piece. 2 random cutaways to the audience show topless women whose breasts were groped by nearby men who didn't, from what I can tell, have permission to touch these women. This happens in shots that last for maybe a second or two each. If that was easy to capture footage of women being sexually assaulted, I can only imagine how widespread it was. He says, second, Limp Bizkit pulled out all the stops to rev up the audience. For the first half of the show, there's a familiar pattern. Limp Bizkit plays an upbeat and pile-driving number, and the audience goes wild. Then Durst encourages everybody to get even crazier. But the wildest moment of the show isn't Break Stuff. It actually occurs about 20 minutes earlier when Limp Bizkit plays a cover of Thieves by the 80s industrial rock Ministry. The reaction from the audience is awe-inspiring. I mean that is both a compliment and a condemnation. You know those berserker crowd scenes in Mad Max Fury Road? That's how crazy it was. It was terrifying, kind of exhilarating to watch.
Yeah, I mean, my recollection of that is obviously I don't think Limp Bizkit is fully to blame. It sounds like they certainly didn't discourage or maybe even slightly encourage some of it. But, I mean, I remember even reports from the time that really what it was is that things kept sort of getting gradually more out of hand, and the organizers of the festival probably should have just stopped and canceled things, but continued to let it go on.
If we can't blame this kind of thing on Limp Bizkit, what are they there for?
What are they even good for?
What is their purpose?
But you talked about earlier how their fans were already raucous enough at their shows way before the '99 Woodstock. This is the kind of crowd they drew.
Yeah, I mean, people, the organizers probably should have been better prepared for the fact that Limp Bizkit fans would be there.
For how Florida it was going to wind up being?
Yes. I mean, it was in New York, right? But it was Florida all the way. So their third album is released in October of 2000, the following year, and is Hayden's favorite. It's called Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water.
Chocolate Starfish!
Can I just tell you guys I had an educational moment when I found out what chocolate starfish and the hot dog flavored water.
If you guys knew what chocolate
I knew what
starfish
chocolate
was,
starfish is. The story about hot dog flavored water that I found may not be, correct, but it's not nearly as gross.
Enlighten us, please, Blaine.
I honestly had never thought about it because I tried to push Limp Bizkit out of my mind, but chocolate starfish is a reference to a butthole. And if you want to talk about what hot dog flavored water is, I imagine your imagination would take care of that for you.
Speaking of hot dog.
Yes.
No, it's not time yet.
Yeah,
Please
okay.
continue.
All right, so this album became the first rock record ever to sell over 1 million copies in a single week. So it attained platinum status the first
Chocolate Starfish
week.
did?
Yes.
Shit.
I don't know if any other rock records have done that since, but it was the first. It actually only attained 6 platinum after a certain period of time, but the song Rollin', was their highest charting single on the Hot 100 at number 65.
I just want to let our fans know that was my pick for this episode, but I got outvoted.
Yeah, you probably could have. All of our commentary would probably be the same, regardless.
Sure. Yeah, not sure it would change anything.
Yeah, but another song off that record called "Take a Look Around," it was also nominated for a Grammy for the best hard rock performance in 2000. This song people may know it because it was in the Mission Impossible 2 movie as part of the soundtrack.
I gotta say, I'm gonna say this.
Go ahead.
I think it's awesome. I think it's good. That's maybe the only track in their catalog that I enjoyed listening to. It's because they have an iconic, cool riff that they're gifted to build a song around immediately. I think that's like the best track they ever did.
All credit that, of course, probably goes to Borland, which we'll talk about, yeah. I'm sure, a little bit as we go on. That song lost to Rage Against the Machine's Guerrilla Radio that year.
As it should.
So, quickly moving on, Borland left the group in 2000 before the recording of their next album called Results May Vary. That album was released in 2003. Original working titles for that album included Bipolar and Panty Sniffer.
Oh, my God.
This album was largely panned by music critics. Stephen Erlewine of AllMusic panned the album, writing, "The music has no melodies, hooks, or energy, and all attention is focused on the clown jumping up and down and screaming in front. And long before the record is over, you're left wondering, how the hell did he ever get to put this mess out?" Despite the lackluster response, though, the album sold over 300,000 copies in its first week. It hit number 3 on the Billboard 200, and it eventually attained platinum status. The big, I think, song from that record was their cover of The Who's Behind Blue Eyes, which hit number 71 on the Hot 100.
Mm-hmm. Doesn't even get heavy, bro.
Yeah, so after this kind of fall off from grace and popularity, Borland rejoins the group in 2004. And in 2005, the band released an EP called The Unquestionable Truth Part 1. Apparently, Durst intentionally released this without any advertising or promotion. And as a result, it only sold 37,000 copies in the U.S. during its first week. So that is quite the fall off from even the last album.
Thank God.
In a review, again, Stephen Erlewine from AllMusic says, the reviewer felt the band was, quote, being held back by Durst, who he called, quote, the most singularly unpleasant, absurd frontman in rock.
He is the only one who's worse than Anthony Kiedis.
Yeah, there's a consensus. It's not just us.
He's the only one that's worse.
Yeah, we're not the only ones here. But after the flop of the EP, the band released their greatest hits with a Z in 2005 and then officially went on hiatus. In an interview, Borland said that it was unlikely that the sequel to Unquestionable Truth would be recorded and said, quote, "As of right now, none of my future plans include Limp Bizkit."
But they do involve Big Dumb Face, which was his first solo project that sucked ass. Speaking of Wes, though, I want to talk about Wes some because I think we all are in a somewhat agreement that obviously Wes Borland is the best part of the band. Mm-hmm. Pretty creative entity.
Did you happen to find out what was wrong with his eyes? Did he have childhood trauma?
Well, he did grow up in Florida.
That's childhood trauma, period.
That's enough. So, yeah, a lot's been written over the years about Wes Borland's like supposed hatred for being in Limp Bizkit. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's kind of been talked about a bunch. But what I did find that I really enjoyed was a Stereo Gum interview from 2015, interviewing Borland ahead. This is after he's left and rejoined the band, I guess a third time. He's left twice at this point, I think.
He rejoins in 2009 for a tour called Unicorns and Rainbows.
Oh, shut the fuck up, Fred. Anyway, so this article is interviewing Wes about, this supposed hatred for being in Limp Bizkit and like his feelings on their upcoming new metal cruise that he's going to be a part of. And the first quote from Wes Borland in regards to this new metal cruise is, "Whenever we aren't on stage, I'll be curled up in a fetal position in my cabin, palms up, while I desperately cling to the last week of my 30s as it slips through my hooked fingers."
Man, that's some despair right there.
That is some serious despair. I mean, can you imagine what the lineup on a 2015 new metal cruise is like? And like, just, man.
God, no, I don't.
He goes on to say, "I'm very aware of my band. I totally get people don't like it and thinks it's a joke, but I've always sort of thought of it as being a Democrat who's voting in a red state anyway." So he's like, obviously, like he's got a sense of humor about it, and he obviously has grander aspirations, but all of his solo projects failed, so yeah. He's just kind of stuck there, and it's like kind of sad. Also in this interview, it gets brought up that Limp Bizkit, like this kind of goes to Blaine's point about the 1999 pin and grunge being over. Limp Bizkit also takes a lot of flack for ruining metal, like Korn and Limp Bizkit in particular. A lot of folks have made that claim. So when confronted with that idea of ruining metal, this is Wes Borland's reaction. "I think metal is so fucking boring that I want to stab my eyes out with screwdrivers. In the 90s, we tried to do something with metal, tried to take it in a new direction, based on combining metal bands with stuff that was on the heels of the grunge movement." So, like, I don't think he was ever, like, totally into the idea. I think it's just kind of what had to happen.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, everything I read about his early time is when he was at this magnet high school for performing arts, he was studying jazz guitar and like experimental stuff.
Right. That makes a lot more sense. Experimental music is definitely what he's interested in. And real quickly, I accidentally stumbled across something that is really funny that is unrelated to this interview. Did you guys know that Wes Borland and Aaron Lewis from Stained have a public beef?
What?
Yeah, like they hate each other.
Not only did I not know, I don't care.
Well, there goes my whole bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, if we do a Stain song later in the podcast, maybe you can bring this back up, Hayden.
I guess it started because Fred Durst signed Stained to his own imprint, Flip Records.
Yeah,
in the late 90s.
This is another tidbit that I didn't mention, but at some point after being signed very early in Limp Bizkit's career, Fred Durst became the vice president of A&R for Interscope Records, which I don't know how that business decision was made, but
we can't talk about that.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug, you guys.
Yeah. Let me wrap up the band's fall from grace here.
So I don't get to tell you guys about this feud. You're not going to tell you this feud
there's more?
stuff?
Yeah, tell us.
Oh yeah.
Is this what happened to Wes Borland's eyes?
This could be what happened to Wes Borland's eyes. Okay, so Aaron Lewis is from like, I don't know, who fucking cares, Indiana or some shit.
Yeah, I think so.
I think he took up residence in Jacksonville during the time when bands were coming out of there. And so at one point, this is Wes Borland recounting an interaction between the two of them. I think maybe in an airport. And I'm quoting Wes Borland now. He goes, "Where are you headed?" And I went, "I'm going home," said Borland. And he goes, "Home?" And I went, "Yeah. I just visited my parents. I'm going back home to L.A. And for the record, I've lived in L.A. longer than I've lived in any other city in my life." And he says, "Nah, man, remember where you came from. Florida's your home, not L.A. Florida's home." And I just went, "Fuck you, man." And I never talked to him again after that. Borland continues to say, "That guy is such a dickhead. So full of himself, such a dickhead. I wish nothing but the worst for him. Amen. I could not believe his audacity and pretentiousness, especially for somebody that acts like they're a country boy now, even though they're from Illinois. Anyway, disgusting person. No thanks. Peace."
I like that.
So it's Illinois, excuse me. The only place worse than Indiana, rural Illinois.
Oh, God.
But yeah, anyway, so we don't have to talk about Aaron Lewis anymore.
So wrapping up Limp Bizkit's kind of fall from grace here, they release an album in 2011 called Gold Cobra. And Durst said that the title did not have a particular meaning, but it was chosen because it, quote, fit the style of the music the band was writing for the album. I have no idea what that means, but it sounds dumb. The album sold less than 80,000 copies in the U.S.
Good.
Give it up, Fred.
Well, the band began to develop their next album called Stampede of the Disco Elephants in 2012. So over the course of 2 years, the band released 4 singles that were to be on the album. But in 2014, they left the record label they were working with, which happened to be Lil Wayne's record label at the time. And in fact, he was on one of the singles. But just to show you where this is, it hasn't been released yet. As of 2021, it has no official release date. Wes Borland has already completed writing and performing guitars for the record, but stated in late 2017 that frontman Fred Durst is, quote, still working on his parts. In that same year, Durst claimed on Instagram...
What parts?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know. I mean, how long does it take to get that shit together?
So... In 2017, Durst claimed on Instagram that the album had already been available online for a year on SoulSeek, which is like a peer-to-peer file sharing, like Kazaa or LimeWire. But when Borland responded to that and refuted it, saying, quote, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So anyway, I'll wrap up everything. There's a couple little miscellaneous tidbits here. So Durst has frequently cited Rage Against the Machine and Faith No More as heavy influences. However, the frontmen of both of these bands have publicly distanced themselves from Limp Bizkit and Durst himself. So in an article I found, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails was quoted in an article saying that he was hanging out with Rage Against the Machine frontman Zach De La Rocha. Apparently, Rocha said when Limp Bizkit came on the TV, like a music video, he just looked at it and said, "God, this sucks." And in response, Reznor said to him, "Yeah, well, this is your fault."
Oh, nice, Trent.
Yeah.
Wow. Trent Reznor is such a badass.
And so, as I said earlier in the career, Durst was VP of A&R at Interscope. And apparently he wanted to get Faith No More on that label. And the Faith No More vocalist Mike Patton was interviewed by a German reporter who asked him about Durst's interest in releasing the band's music on his label. And Patton said, quote, he can lick my ass.
Wow. Didn't even use chocolate starfish.
Didn't he? And the last two little bits here. In 2014, Rolling Stone placed Limp Bizkit as number 10 on their list of 10 bands that should break up immediately.
Oh, do you have that list handy?
No, I don't have it handy, but it includes Nickelback, Coldplay, the Rolling Stones.
Wow.
And then the last little bit here, in 2009, this is when they're reuniting for a tour. Durst stated in an interview that one of the challenges he had with reconciling with the band was coming to the realization that he hated the fans, saying that they misinterpreted his lyrics. Quote, for years, I looked into the crowd and saw a bunch of bullies and assholes who tortured me and ruined my life.
So Fred Durst is playing the victim now of his own fans.
He must have been performing in front of the mirror, is what I would say in that case. So anyway, that's all the stuff I have on the background. So I want to get into the song.
I'll see y'all later. I gotta go.
So the song breaks one of songwriting's
stuff.
It breaks stuff. It breaks one of the unwritten rules of songwriting. The famous quote, "Don't bore us, get to the chorus." It takes 1 minute and 18 seconds before the first chorus comes in. And, this isn't always necessarily a bad thing, even in pop music, but it's made worse by the fact that the verse is just utterly unremarkable. I did not recall what it sounded like at all until I started listening it again this week. I'm like,
either.
This is the verse? Okay, whatever.
Yeah, me either.
I'm really kind of blown away that the song was... I guess it really kind of shows the difference between music then and now, because people are still probably listening to radio, watching MTV. There is no chance that if this song came out now in the era of streaming and Spotify that people would not hit skip after the first 30 seconds.
Good point, yeah.
But anyway, another small point, his vocal asides, the kind of doubling parts he does in the verse are just fucking stupid. A lot of them just seem randomly placed. So rather than adding anything to it, it just sort of...
What the hell? What you want me to say?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the ones he does it on.
Yeah, it robs the rap of any minimal rhythmic flow it would have had otherwise. And also, this song overall is probably one of the least annoying sounding voices that he uses. Mm-hmm. But in those little asides, he puts his weird kind of affect to his...
Whoa, hang on a goddamn second, Josh. What is happening? Somebody sexually assault a weasel?
That's what he sounds like. I'm sorry.
I don't know that he does.
But just that high-pitched, whiny kind of thing he does.
Right.
And so, it just comes in there on these little sides, and I hate it. Another thing with the vocals, and this is really the only thing I'll say about the lyrics, is that the second verse steals the tender heart in a blender line from the Eve 6 song Inside Out.
Something he does quite a bit, actually.
I get the sense that he was doing that as a dig, making fun of that song. But, fuck you, Fred. That song is vastly superior to anything you've ever contributed to.
Yeah, it really is. Unfortunately, man.
That makes more sense now about that lyric.
Yeah, I don't think he was just stealing it to stealing. I think he was kind of saying, look at this sort of pansy song or whatever.
Right.
The vibe.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, he actually goes at, in one of the lyrics I was looking, he kind of goes after Trent Reznor. I'm glad you brought him up earlier. He kind of makes a dig at Trent Reznor. A friend of mine and I were talking about this the other day. It's who the fuck do you think you are to talk about Trent Reznor? That dude is a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame member. Has produced some of the biggest selling soundtracks in music industry history. Shut the fuck up, Fred. Don't you go after Trent.
Some of the best movie soundtracks, even.
Yeah, absolutely.
An incredibly successful individual,
Yeah, he doesn't really have a leg to stand on there for sure. My next point is talking about the guitar riffs, and Hayden, you can jump on this. Borland is obviously very talented, and the riffs in the song are good, but to me, there's not enough harmonic variety in them to make them all that interesting, and each one of them is no longer than a measure long, and so it just keeps getting repeated over and over again to where any sort of interest I had in it has interesting rhythmic structure to it. He does crazy weird tunings, and that makes you be able to do riffs that you normally wouldn't be able to on a standard tuned guitar. But just by the third or fourth repetition of each of it, I'm kind of okay, I've heard it. Especially once you get to the second verse and chorus,
I understand what you're saying, but I think that's, much like the Peppers, I'll defend this song musically quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I think the riff is cool. I think the lack of harmonic variance is interesting, but I also like a lot of drone and more metal kind of music than you do.
Yeah, that's more up your alley.
I like that it's a muscular and rhythmic structure rather than a melodic one. It's just a burly moving octave up and down the neck kind of thing. And I was looking into the tuning because we talked about that earlier in the week. You know me, I love drop tunings.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah,
guitars is kind of my thing. So I tried to challenge myself to see if I could figure it out with my ear without without an instrument, just like in my head. I was pretty close, but what he ends up using is a 4-string custom guitar that he's got tuned down to F sharp and then tuned up to F sharp on the second string. So he literally is playing an octave, which is like pretty ahead of the curve. Like that's kind of become a trend in like popular metal now. One of my favorite bands around right now called Enter Arma. I think they're the first metal band to have all over 8s on Pitchfork for reference. I mean, they're a widely acclaimed band. They tune to drop B standard, where they keep all strings standard, and then drop the low to a B, which creates an octave. So it makes it sound very unique. So it's a trend that continues to today. So I would argue that Wes was a little ahead of the curve there in his thinking.
I was really curious about what you guys were going to say about it, just sans lyrics, just the music, and
it's cool.
I could almost say that I almost lean into the cool. That first part where there's like a couple of measures where it just plays a little more quietly, and then the heavier riff comes in. I thought that was okay, honestly.
And that's saying a lot coming from you, because that's not really your stick,
No, it's not really, but it's got energy to it, the music. But I'll say, yeah.
I mean, again, I think we already mentioned anything of musical value that came out of this song and this band can, I think, be directly contributed to Wes Borland. And I think Hayden makes a really good point mentioning that a lot of those kind of, I mean, it's not a bass, it's not a guitar, it's somewhere weird in between what he's playing on this song. And I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of that going on at the time.
I think the low string I read was like a 0.65 gauge to handle that note.
Yeah, which is it's basically the low string on a baritone guitar,
right?
Which would be like similar to the low string of a 7-string guitar,
right? Because it holds the note really well. It doesn't warble.
Yeah, I mean it's still. I mean you're going from a B down to F sharp. You still get a little bit of that warble, but not enough to where the tuning stability is a problem.
Right?
Weren't the Flaming Lips doing a 4-string guitar kind of thing around a few years earlier?
That's a good question. I don't know, but I would imagine if anybody was, they would be.
Yeah, okay. I'm not familiar with that. So the last thing I'll say kind of ties into a little bit of this, but it's sort of my overarching part, that the bridge of this song is good, but it's too good for the song.
The bridge is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, just to kind of give our listeners sort of a little background, the bridge of a song, it typically functions as kind of like a glue between the last and second to last choruses of a song. And so it will often bring down the dynamics at the end of the second chorus and then bring it back up to that final push to the final chorus. So, I mean, bridges do a lot of work. And a well-written bridge can do a lot of work to give dynamic interest of a song.
Some would say it's the hardest part of a song to write.
Yes,
it is.
And the thing is when I hear a lot of pop songs, the bridge seems to be an afterthought. And I'm sure all three of us are guilty of this as songwriters. You write the chorus and then maybe the verse, and then you're like, oh shit, I got to do a bridge. Mm-hmm. And they often don't get the attention it deserves. Mm-hmm. But this particular bridge stands out for being so much different from the rest of the song. It does a very good job of bringing the excitement down and then lifting that tension up. I mean, even though I would say overall it kind of sounds a little bit like a Korn copy in that particular section.
Well, that's what they are.
I think a lot of the criticism they got for being too similar to Korn, this section is very indicative of that. But the bridge is the one time in the song that
it's his best melody by far.
Yeah, I mean it's the one time in the song that anything interesting happens harmonically, as in there's actually like a chord progression happening. You can hear that bass movement. Yeah. It also happens to be the only part in the song, and maybe in the entire Limp Bizkit catalog, where Durst's voice isn't incredibly annoying.
Yeah.
He actually sounds like somewhat of a real singer at this point.
Yeah, and going back to where you said you didn't realize what the lyrics said before you came back to the song, or you'd forgotten that it even had lyrics and stuff like that in the verses. I forgot about this bridge completely until this week. And I think you're right about his voice being a little less annoying there. I don't know. I'll wait until the floodgates open for my bit.
So, I mean, like I said, the bridge does a good job of all the dynamics, but it just immediately goes back to the chorus, reedited the same way it was before, and the transition is very kind of stark in my mind. I mean, it really seems like Wes Borland was trying his damnedest to make this a respectable song, but then Durst steps back and says, like, nah, dude, sorry, I'm taking this right back to the shitter.
Nah, bro, not enough titties in it.
Yeah, I mean, so, but again, my whole overarching point is that the bridge is so good, or not, it's not amazing, but it's good enough and so much better than the rest of the song that it almost serves to just highlight how shitty the rest of the song is.
It's not a bad point. Hey, what the fuck does he mean by cookie?
That is one of those classic moments where we have a band sitting in the studio or before pre-studio, but when they wrote it, and they are asking themselves, what rhymes with this word? What rhymes with Nookie? And everybody in the room looks around and says, cookie? But you know what? I'm going to challenge them, and I'm going to say it could have been forced, but I think Dookie could have worked.
Oh, no. I knew Dookie would come into this.
Hey, it's already come up.
I just want to say one thing. I'm going to say one thing about the song. And it's a realization that just came to me. I think that if Eric Cartman were a real person, he would have grown to be Fred Durst.
I do not disagree.
I can just see him see Eric Cartman in a backwards red Yankees hat, like picking the skin off KFC. You know?
Well, that's all I have to say.
I won't lie, and I can't deny you guys.
I have nothing left to say about the song in particular. I know the lyrics are sort of an area that, Blaine, you like to mine. So why don't you take it from here?
Before I begin, I just remember my very first encounter with Limp Bizkit, which I'm sure a lot of people do because it tends to be scarring. I had a friend who had bought a used car around 98 or so, and even back then, the car had a Limp Bizkit sticker on it, which baffled us because we had no idea who this was pre-internet. So we had no way of looking it up or tracking down, and we just assumed it was a drug reference. We thought, that's got to be like a pill. And I think my friend even said it, that's a drug reference, that's like a pill. And once Faith obviously had come out, but I don't think it was on our radar. So Nookie was one of the first things I remember. And he took a razor blade and alcohol to that sticker faster than you can say, like a chump.
Hey.
And I'll assert that this band has never put out anything good. I know you guys were talking about things that were tolerable, but their covers of Behind Blue Eyes and Faith, I think, are no exception. Break Stuff, Rolling, the list goes on. And Hayden, you pressured me into listening to both Hot Dog and No Sex this week.
Oh, man, I'm so glad you brought up Hot Dog.
You
guys ready for this?
Yeah, talk to me about it a little, yeah.
I mean, I just have this thought about Limp Bizkit and Korn in particular being maybe for the first time and only time in music history band. Like Korn is better than this, so they had better moments, but they both were guilty of like just trying to be as vulgar as possible, only for vulgarity's sake.
Exactly, yeah.
Like that's literally all it's about. It's not about anything other than trying to be vulgar. And I don't really think that I can think of another time in music history where that really happened. So to illustrate my point, I made both Josh and Blaine listen to the song Hot Dog off of Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water. I would recommend all of our listeners immediately listen to this track.
Or not.
But no, you should do it. I'm going to read you a clip of what you're in for from verse 3 to illustrate my point. I apologize for my dirty talk. I am just quoting Fred here. Ain't life a bitch, a fucked up bitch, a fucked up sore with a fucked up stitch. A fucked up head, it's a fucked up shame. Swinging on my nuts is a fucked up game. Jealousy filling up a fucked up mind. It's real fucked up like a fucked up crime. If I say fuck 2 more times, that's 46 fucks in this fucked up rhyme.
So tender-hearted is what we're getting from him.
I get a lot of compassion.
I'm sorry, but Steve Martin already did it in Trains, Planes, and Automobiles.
Yes.
Oh, speaking of this, hang on, listen to this one. Like a fucked up pump with a fucked up mouth, a 9-inch nail, I'll get knocked the fuck out. Shut up, Fred. Don't you dare talk about Trent.
Your personal friend, Trent.
He's my pal.
It's noteworthy, I think, that in '99, MTV and their show TRL played this song almost as much as they were playing the Backstreet Boys and Britney Spears.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So some of it almost feels like a backlash to the squeaky clean.
That's what nu metal was, for sure. It was definitely a revolt against that, but I would just argue that Limp Bizkit and Korn took the vulgarity to different extremes.
Absolutely. No, I'm not defending them. And by the way, for our listeners, nu metal is not N-E-W, new, it's N-U.
Umlaut.
Oh, yeah, the umlaut. Yes, excuse me.
Noir metal.
If you haven't picked up on this, I hate Limp Bizkit. Some of these artists that you guys have talked about, and I was on this podcast and covered Kenny Chesney, I find them somewhere between benign and distasteful. You know, Kenny Chesney ushered in just a pop country with hints of bro country to come, but I don't hate him. I just think he's incredibly annoying. I loathe this band. From '99 on, ever since Nookie, and that was the one I did. Obviously, somehow or another, I avoided Faith before that. So, though I do remember it. So ever since this song Nookie hit MTV and the radio, I have been simmering on a apoplectic fury for these dudes.
Blaine, you look so distraught right now. I wish the viewers could see how angry you look.
They bring it more than any other band I think ever. I would have to struggle to think of another. The aspects of this particular song waver from irritating to infuriating. The merely bothersome parts are just kind of dumb. And we talked about how Durst tends to come along behind some of the inline words to make an attempt to reiterate the idea, and I'm being kind with that intention. But the example we've already probably mentioned is that he's dwelling on the past burning up my brain, hot. It's you
did a much better job of that than I could have.
The Beastie Boys were doing so much better. It reminded me of them. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of rap he was trying to mimic, and they, of course, are professionals. And it's faux rap from Durst, and it really, really sounds like he's desperate
it's pronounced pho, right? Come on.
Oh, is it? But it sounds like Durst is desperate to accommodate for some sort of shortcoming all throughout the song and the album. The opening line exemplifies something I want to uncover just a little and unpack an incel way of thinking as Durst half raps that I came into this world as a reject, and that is the ethos behind incel thinking. I think
I can see the thin blue line now.
And he came into this world as a reject. That goes without saying, but okay, let's start there. He continues dwelling on my past, looking into these eyes, and you'll see the size of the flames. Now, knowing what we do about incel culture and Durst, that we didn't know in '99, we can now see that flame Durst is singing about is going to cause this loser to pick up a gun and kill someone. That's not the burning of the flame that Elvis once sang about. That's not the burning love. This is the burning that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Or the burning from his chlamydia test.
Could be. And that same opening verse defines what's got him all aggro, which is, and here's a quote, "My girlie ran away with my pay when the fellas came to play." So he's ticked that this lady took some money from him and then messed around with some fellas. At some point, though, Fred has to get some acceptance under his belt. It's not her, it's him,
Also, don't call her girl, you fucking pervert.
Yeah, she's a lady, all right? Well, in Fred's case, could have been a girl with his high school hanging out.
Oh, yeah, Jesus Christ. All right, let's move on.
But it leads to arguably the worst part of the song. I bet I'm going to get some agreement from one of you two guys, at least. There are so many parts to pick, but this is the worst. He repeats this 7 times. Like a chump, hey. Like a chump, hey. And I want to speak personally to Durst now because I'm sure he will listen one-on-one. If someone does you wrong, it's not your fault, brother. It's theirs. You're okay. You're not the chump, okay? It's them. No, it's actually him.
No, it's you.
Yeah,
it's definitely you. You backwater Florida asshole.
The second verse says, should I be feeling bad? No. Should I be feeling good? No. I can't even do that one. It's so awkward. That may be the closest the song gets to any nuance, which if nuance is the North Pole, these lyrics are Antarctica. He almost addresses the fact that there are feelings between good and bad.
Oh, wow. That's very complex.
But he didn't mean it that way.
Of course not.
In fact, if you look at the Genius account for this, when he says, should I be feeling bad? Some writer came in, some contributor said, Fred doesn't know whether to feel bad or good because on one hand, he feels he should feel good that he is better off without her. But on the other hand, she has hurt him so badly, so he would feel bad and he just doesn't know what to feel. Really? God, it took you really uncovered some Shakespearean type writing there.
That's basically Melville. We are so doomed as a species, you guys.
And I would have had a lot more respect for the song were it not for they used the term Nookie. I mean, why not just go ahead and dig into the pig he is and just say pussy on the song? That and get the bleep, get the have it censored.
I can tell you why, because he's a fucking chump.
As he admits.
I've got another lyric I want to read to you guys. Just because I want to. No, it's not really tying to anything. But right before Limp Bizkit put out Significant Other, Fred Durst guested on Korn's 1998 Follow the Leader record on the track All in the Family, where him and Jonathan Davis have a rap battle back and forth, insulting one another. And it was kind of, I think, Fred Durst, the first time he was heard by a massive audience. And boy, did he fuck up his opportunity. So they're just trying to insult one another, and this is unfortunately, I couldn't pull the best verses because he's so insistent on using homophobic slurs, and I'm not going to say that. So this is the only one I could find without any of that that's still pretty funny. But here we go. Who's hot? Who's not? You best step back, you corn on the cob. You need a new job. Time to take them mic skills back to the dentist and buy yourself a new grill. You pumpkin pie, I'll jack off in your eye. Climbing chutes and ladders while your ego shatters, but you can't get away because it's doomsday, kid. It's doomsday. Oof. This is how Fred Durst presented himself to the world on a mass market for the first time.
Is he freestyling this, or was this pre-prepared?
This pre-prepared.
Oh, God.
You pumpkin pie, I'll jack off in your eye. Get the fuck out of here.
Well, it further goes for his genius. When you think about the line, and I'll stick it up your, yeah. Why not put a word in there? Stick it up your, whatever. Ass is probably
I would argue that Fred Durst is probably incapable of freestyling also.
Oh, yeah.
You're probably right. I always assumed that was a radio edit.
No.
To stick it, but it's not. It's the actual lyric in the recorded on the album. And of course, I found a performance of this song from 2015. They're playing a huge crowd. There's so much about it that's bad. None of the members of the band look like they want to be there. But at the very end, after the last chorus and the song's kind of trailing down, he says, "Yeah, and stick it up your tight little ass."
The chump line always annoyed me, but I can remember back in 99, 2000 hearing, "Stick it up your yeah," and I would just think, just fucking say something there. In the second verse, he says, "I can't believe I was deceived," and then he says, "But you were." So now we get him talking to himself in the third person, which is very on brand. And I will take the stance that this is the worst set of lyrics, particularly with the pre-chorus and chorus, that's ever made it to mainstream.
Oh yeah, that's a bold statement.
Yeah, that's a very bold statement.
No, it is. Notice my qualifier, that ever made it to mainstream and had to, MTV playing it and stuff like that.
I'd be interested to think about what could be worse. That would be a fun project, but I can't. Nothing comes to mind off the top of the head.
On a very special episode of This Song Sucks.
There was a couple of Reddit responses in defense of the band in general, and I'll give you two quick ones. The average music listener has room temperature IQ and is incapable of paying attention to anything except vocals. With Fred being the band's weakest link, they dismissed the entire project as angsty frat boy anthems without ever taking notice of the musicianship. And the other person says, Fred did have a killer voice, though. This band, though, THO, this band was never meant to be taken seriously, parentheses, lyrically, but people are dicks.
I mean, the argument about the musicianship of the band, and we kind of spoke on this earlier, like Hayden and I both feel like they're good, tight musicians.
Yeah, they're a tight band.
I'm sorry, but like I shouldn't have to ignore the just giant zit that is Fred Durst on this band. I mean, it is the band. Like, yeah, maybe if you take him out and replace him with somebody else and it's the same lyrics, it might even be different. But like, it is what it is. Like, you can't ask for forgiveness after the fact.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And you know, go ahead, Blaine.
Well, I just wanted to tie in something I barely mentioned about the incel connection, and you brought it to my attention, and it made perfect sense to the point where I went and found some people who absolutely agree.
Right. I'll just preface this because I was going to mention it.
Yeah.
You mentioned the incel earlier, but I just researching about Durst and then the band. I mean, the thesis statement that I had was that the band itself and the people who were into this kind of music, like really hard back in the day, was really just a precursor to incel culture before it was called that. I mean, you really called out the like a chump part, and what comes before it is like a woman who's wronged him, and you're a chump, you're less than a man, because of you've been wronged by a woman,
right? And
it's that kind of attitude that is part of that whole incel thing, from my understanding. But apparently, you dug in a little bit on that.
Yeah, there's more than you would think. Maybe for listeners, the Southern Poverty Law Center says that they are labels them a hate group and that they are resentful, misogynistic, self-pitying. And they're it's important. I think it's important to note that they're largely heterosexual and white.
Well, yeah, no brainer there.
As if you didn't already guess. From Flavor Wire article, quote, "I did it all for the Nookie claim to music's most aggressively priapatic frontman, a man whose entire demeanor just screamed incel rage. Okay, if you say so, Fred."
Sounds about right.
Yeah, spot on.
From Punch Up the Jam podcast, they note that if there's one thing to take away from this episode, that's their episode, it's that Fred Durst was definitely a virgin when he wrote this song.
No doubt.
Mm-hmm.
He'll probably die one too, just like Eric Cartman. Do I have to have 2 cookies, you guys?
I write what I feel. This is Durst. I write what I feel. He continued to plead his man of the people credentials to borderline comic effect. But I always think, would 95% of the people identify with this? If not, I don't write it. Take what you will from that.
I can't.
You know, the song we briefly mentioned was called Eat You Alive. That's the one he did about Britney Spears famously rejecting him. A woman 12 years younger than him. That's the exact number.
Woof. Major.
And there's more, but you know, if you're really interested in this, you can find it pretty easily. I think some of the keywords I typed in was misogyny and Limp Bizkit.
Well, it's interesting because, I mean, for time, I guess we're getting close to time, but I didn't do as much of my YouTube comment dive as I normally would because of this reason, because like I read way more than I should have, and man, it is just toxic masculinity unchecked. I'll give you a brief example that, you know, kind of ties into what you're talking about. But like one person says, this song makes me want to break into someone's house and water their flowers.
What does that even mean?
And the comments, the comments that follow illustrate what he meant.
Okay.
You mean nutting, right? Wink. Twice on Sundays. You know, Limp Bizkit for life. You know, this is the kind of shit you're seeing on these comment threads. So I just couldn't really take a whole lot of it.
Please tell me you have some levity though from this.
Yeah, I do. So
okay, good. Let's end with that.
what we got here is a guy named HVAC J, says, he says, damn, I don't want to be 47 years old anymore.
Same, bro. Same.
Oh, God.
Cookie Monster must feel personally attacked.
There's got to be a parody of Cookie Monster.
I
doing
didn't
this
search,
song,
but
right?
I would imagine there probably is. And we'll go out on this one. Kirby has to say, I think of this song whenever I have to wear an oversized sweater or t-shirt.
I don't get that either. Okay.
You don't get that?
Do I not?
Did you look at Fred Durst's coat in the Nookie video?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Wearing a puffy jacket in the summertime for some reason?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
He's got super baggy pleated khakis on.
God, I fucking hate him. I'm not a chump, you guys. You get me?
One of my brothers has a Crimson Tide hat that's a fitted hat, and every time I see it, I tell him, I tell him Fred Durst called. He wants his hat back.
Chris or Kevin?
Kevin.
Is Kevin listening to this podcast?
I don't know. He may not if he did before or after this. But anyway, I think we'll wrap up on that note to our listeners who stuck it out through this episode. Thank you.
Why?
That's a good question. So, Hayden, thanks as always. Blaine, thank you for joining us.
It was a pleasure, guys.
We'll have you back real soon.
This episode really skinned my ass raw.
Yeah, we got to go have a palate cleanser. I'm about to put on a record or something.
I'm gonna go do yoga.
That's a good way. All right, see y'all later. This Song Sucks is brought to you by The Alabama Take. Follow us on Instagram at This Song Sucks Pod and on Twitter at SucksPod. You can also find us on the Alabama Take Facebook page. Comments, hate mail, and song suggestions for future shows can be sent to thisSongSucksPod@gmail.com.